Winter mornings in Vermont always felt heavier than they should. And that weight followed Emily Carter everywhere she went inside the quiet house she now shared with her new husband, David, and his grown son, Evan. She had moved in only 4 months ago, still carrying boxes of hope, still believing she could build something warm inside this home that had once belonged to another woman. But every day since the wedding felt like she was trying to speak in a language no one wanted to hear. The one place she could breathe was the small upstairs bathroom. It wasn't fancy, just soft yellow light, a narrow window with frost around the edges, and a cold mirror that always surprised her, but it felt like the only room where she wasn't walking on someone else's memory. She closed the door gently behind her that morning, needing a moment to settle her thoughts before the day began. She splashed warm water on her face, trying to wash away the tightness that had been living in her chest since she moved in. Living with Evan had proved harder than she expected. He wasn't cruel or rude. He simply acted as if she wasn't there. He left early, came home late, and kept to himself. When he did pass her in the hallway, he just nodded quickly and disappeared. A quiet coldness settled between them, not hateful, but heavy enough to make her feel like an outsider in her own kitchen. She knew he missed his mother, and she respected that grief, but she wished he would at least see that she wasn't trying to replace anything. She only wanted kindness, even a small one. That morning, as she stood by the mirror, she whispered to herself, "Maybe today will be different." She didn't quite believe it, but the hope felt nice for a second. Reached for a towel, listening to the soft hum of the radiator in the hallway. The house was calm, almost peaceful, until she heard footsteps just outside the door. She assumed it was David getting ready for work. He always forgot which door creaked and which didn't, but the footsteps paused. Then, without any warning, the handle turned. The door pushed open an inch, letting in a sharp rush of cold air. Emily froze where she stood. Her heart jumped. Someone was coming in. Before she could call out, she saw a shadow move, and then she heard a startled voice. "Emily, I didn't know. I'm so sorry." It was Evan. Their eyes met for half a second before he immediately pulled back and slammed the door shut. The sound echoed through the hallway like a dropped plate. Emily stood there, breath caught in her chest, unsure what to feel: shock, embarrassment, confusion. It all rushed through her at once. The moment lasted only a heartbeat, but it cracked. Something opened inside her. She had barely spoken to him in months, and suddenly he was standing outside the bathroom, sounding more shaken than she had ever heard him. She waited, expecting him to walk away like he always did, but she heard him breathing on the other side of the door, quick, unsteady, almost like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Emily wrapped the towel around her shoulders and opened the door slowly. The hallway felt colder than usual. Evan stood there, his hands half raised as if he had been rehearsing an apology he wasn't ready to give. When he saw her step out, he took a step back, cheeks red, eyes wide, looking younger than his 22 years. "I'm sorry," he said again, voice low but sincere. "I thought Dad was in there. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't mean to. It's okay," Emily said quickly. She wasn't angry. She was just stunned by the sudden closeness, the sudden emotion in his voice. For the first time, he wasn't distant or cold. He was human, nervous, uncertain, and maybe hurting more than she realized. Evan nodded once, then turned as if to escape down the stairs. But he didn't move. Instead, he stood there, caught in a moment neither of them understood. Emily wanted to ask him if he was all right, if something had changed, if maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready to speak to her like family. But before she could find the words, the distant sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the moment apart. David was home. Evan stepped back, locked his emotions behind the quiet walls he always carried with him, and walked away without another word. And Emily stood there in the hallway, still holding her towel, realizing something had shifted, something small, something fragile, but something that might finally lead them toward Understanding. Emily stepped out of the bathroom, still feeling the shock of what had happened, tried to steady her breathing as she walked down the hallway toward the living room. The house felt strangely quiet, as if it knew something important had just shaken the walls. She expected Evan to retreat to his room like he always did, but instead she found him standing near the staircase, pacing with short, restless steps. His shoulders were tight, his jaw stiff, but his eyes kept darting toward her like he was gathering courage. He stopped pacing the second he saw her. "I swear I didn't mean to walk in," he said quickly, words rushing out before she could even open her mouth. "I thought Dad was in there. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't even look. At the door, I messed up. Sorry." His voice cracked on the last word. Emily had never heard him sound so unsettled. "It's all right," she said gently, keeping her voice soft so he wouldn't run off. "Really, it was an accident," but he shook his head hard. "You don't get it? I've been acting like you're not even here. And then I go and do that. You probably think I'm some kind of idiot." She stepped closer, careful not to overwhelm him. "I don't think that," she said. "I know this hasn't been easy for you." Evan let out a humorless laugh as he rubbed the back of his neck. "Easy? Nothing about this has been easy." Emily could see the truth in his eyes. Months of silence, grief, confusion, and guilt twisted into a knot he didn't know how to untangle. She had only seen the quiet version of him, the distant young man who slipped through the house like a shadow. She hadn't realized how much he was holding inside. "I didn't hate you," he said suddenly, almost blurting it out. "It seemed like I did, but I didn't." Emily felt the words land in her chest. "What did you feel?" she asked softly. He looked away as if saying it directly would cost him something. "I just wasn't ready. When Dad told me he wanted to marry again, I thought he was moving on too fast. And I wasn't sure how I was supposed to feel about it." Emily nodded. She didn't push. She didn't want to make him explain his grief, only understand it. "I loved my mom," he continued, voice low. "We all did. And after she passed, I tried to act like I was fine. But when you came into the picture, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if talking to you meant forgetting her." Emily's heart broke in a quiet, gentle way, not out of sadness for herself, but for him. She could finally see the hurt behind his cold distance. He had never been angry with her. He had been scared of his own heart. "I'm not here to replace her," Emily said. "And I don't want you to feel like choosing kindness toward me takes anything away from her memory." Evan's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "I know that. I think I knew it all along. I just didn't want to say it out loud." For the first time since she married David, Emily saw a small crack in the wall Evan always kept around himself. A small opening, but an important one. He took a shaky breath. "That moment outside the bathroom, I realized how messed up I've been acting. You didn't deserve any of that." Emily smiled softly. "We can start fresh whenever you're ready." Before Evan could answer, the sound of a car door slammed outside. David had returned earlier than usual. The moment between them froze, almost suspended in midair. Emily could see fear flash across Evan's face. Fear of what his father might think, fear of losing the courage he had barely gathered. David stepped through the front door, calling Emily. "I'm home." Evan backed away quickly, running a hand through his hair as if trying to erase the vulnerability he had just shown. "I'll talk to you later," he whispered, avoiding her eyes again, but not out of coldness this time. It was out of uncertainty, maybe hope, maybe fear of saying too much too soon. He slipped upstairs before David could see him, leaving Emily alone in the hallway with a heart that suddenly felt lighter. Something had changed, something real. The distance wasn't gone, but it had cracked. And now, for the first time, Emily believed it might actually disappear someday. That evening, Emily moved around the kitchen quietly, trying to shake off the tension that had built up earlier. The warm scent of simmering soup filled the room, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Evan, to the look in his eyes, the way his voice had trembled outside the bathroom. She realized she had been wrong to think he was distant because he didn't like her. He was struggling, and she had only just started to understand how much. As she wiped down the counter, her hand brushed against a folded piece of paper tucked into the kitchen drawer. She frowned, curious. It wasn't hers, and she didn't recognize the handwriting immediately. Carefully, she unfolded it. It was a letter handwritten in neat, tight lines, with words that made her heart ache. It was from Evan. Emily single quotes as eyes moved quickly across the page. He had written about missing his mother, about the emptiness that sometimes swallowed him. Whole, about the fear of welcoming someone new into their family. He wrote about guilt for feeling anger toward her, guilt for resenting the life that was moving forward without her mother. He admitted he didn't know how to act around her, didn't know if he should trust himself to care for someone else's happiness while holding on to his own grief. Tears pricked her eyes as she read. She could feel the pain in each line, though confusion and longing, the tender hesitancy of a young man trying to navigate a new family. She realized she had underestimated him. Evan wasn't cold or unkind. He was scared, uncertain, and carrying a heart full of loyalty and love for someone who could no longer be there. She sat down on the kitchen stool, holding the letter close. Every word felt like a bridge being built between them, a bridge she hadn't realized was necessary until now. She understood why he had acted distant, why he had avoided conversations, why he had seemed so careful around her. He was protecting himself, protecting memories, and struggling to find a place in a family that had changed overnight. Her thoughts drifted to David, who had been quiet and supportive, but she knew he hadn't realized the depth of Evan's feelings. She could see why the young man sometimes shut down completely, why he could be harsh without meaning it. He was grieving, trying to find his balance. And she, as much as she wanted to, couldn't force him to open up. She had to wait, be patient, and show him through her actions that she cared. At that moment, David walked into the kitchen. He stopped when he saw her holding the letter, the soft glow of the light catching her teary eyes. He said gently, his voice low. Is everything okay? Emily shook her head slightly, looking up at him with a small, bittersweet smile. It's Evan, she said. I found this in the drawer. He wrote it himself. David's brow furrowed as he leaned against the counter. A letter. What does it say? Emily held it close for a moment before answering. Everything he hasn't been able to say, confused, and he's hurting. David's eyes softened as he listened, and he nodded slowly. I should have helped him more, helped you more. I didn't realize how much he was holding in. Emily smiled faintly, reaching for his hand. We still can, she said quietly. Her voice carried hope, but also relief. Finally, she understood that the walls Evan had built weren't unbreakable, and now she had the key to understanding him better. David's hand closed around hers, and the warmth of his touch reminded her why she had come into this family, why she had chosen to be patient, and why she wanted to stay. They didn't need perfect moments. They needed understanding, patience, and love, as the three of them existed in that quiet kitchen. Even with Evan upstairs, Emily realized something important. The family she had dreamed of wasn't about instant connection or effortless harmony. It was about taking small steps, creating trust, and showing care in ways that words sometimes could not. And tonight, with a letter in her hands, she had taken one of those steps. She felt a flicker of hope, a hope that Evan would come down and talk, a hope that walls could be lowered, a hope that love could grow even in the middle of pain. But before she could say anything else, a soft voice called from the hallway. We need to talk, Evan said. Emily's heart skipped. She looked toward the stairs, realizing that the moment of real honesty and understanding was arriving sooner than she expected. And in that moment, she knew things were about to change. Evan's voice echoed softly from the hallway, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. She set the letter on the counter and took a deep breath, knowing this conversation could change everything. David, who had been standing quietly beside her, gave her a small nod, as if to say, "We're ready for this." Emily walked toward the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Yet filled with hope, Evan was leaning against the railing, his hands gripping it tightly, knuckles white. His eyes flicked between her and David, filled with a mix of fear and courage that had been building inside him for months. I need to say this before I lose the courage," he said, voice low but steady. "Sorry, Emily. About today, about before, about everything I've done that made you feel unwelcome." Emily stopped a few steps away, her heart softening. "Evan," she said gently, "you don't have to apologize for your feelings. I understand more than you know." He swallowed hard and continued. "I wasn't ready to accept someone new. In our family, I was scared, confused, and I thought if I stayed distant, I could keep things the same. But I realize now that's not fair to anyone, especially you." Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. She could see how sincere he was, how much he had carried alone. For the first time, the walls he had built around himself were visible cracks, letting a little light through. "I didn't know how to tell you," Evan said, voice trembling slightly. "I've missed my mom every single day, and I didn't want to feel like I was betraying her memory by letting you in. I wanted to respect her, but I also want to respect you." Emily stepped closer, keeping her tone soft and steady. "Evan, you don't have to choose. Loving someone doesn't erase the past. It doesn't take away your memories. You can remember your mom and still let me be part of your life. We can figure this out together." He looked down at his hands, a small smile flickering across his face. I think I've been waiting for permission to feel that way," he admitted quietly. Permission to move forward without forgetting her. David stepped forward, placing a hand on Evan's shoulder. "Son, we've never wanted you to forget. We want to build a future together as a family without taking away what you loved. That's the only way we can all be happy." Evan nodded, finally allowing himself to exhale. The tension that had seemed permanent in the house all these months began to dissolve. For the first time, he let himself be seen fully, not as the distant, brooding young man, but as someone who wanted to belong. Emily reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm. "We can start fresh, Evan," she said. "I want us to be honest with each other. I want us to try." He looked up at her, a mix of relief and gratitude in his eyes. "I'd like that," he said softly. The three of them stood there in the hallway for a long moment, letting the quiet fill the space between words. Then, slowly, Evan walked toward the living room, David close behind him, and Emily followed, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt since she moved in. It wasn't just hope, it was the beginning of something real. Dinner that night felt different. Laughter came more easily, and conversation flowed naturally. Evan even shared a story about his mother, and instead of feeling awkward, Emily listened and nodded, honoring the memory while showing she belonged too. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Later, when the dishes were done, David pulled Emily aside and kissed her gently on the forehead. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being patient, for understanding, for caring." Emily smiled, leaning into his embrace. "We're all learning," she said, "but I think we're getting there." From the stairs, Evan called down Emily. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She nodded and went to him. They sat on the couch, the room warm and quiet, and he handed her a small notebook. "I've been writing," he said. "Not letters this time, just thoughts. Want you to know how I'm feeling, not just the bad stuff, but all of it." Emily took it, touched by his honesty, and smiled. "Thank you, Evan. That means a lot to me." He smiled back, and for the first time it felt like the tension between them had lifted completely. They weren't perfect, but they were willing to try, willing to care, and willing to become a real family in that quiet Vermont house. Under the soft glow of the living room lights, Emily realized something important. Love wasn't just about passion or romance. It was about patience, understanding, and choosing to stay even when it was hard. The walls that had kept them apart were coming down, one honest word at a time. And as she looked at David and Evan, she knew their story wasn't about replacing the past. It was about building a new future together, slowly, carefully, but with hearts wide open. For Emily, that moment marked a beginning. A family once fractured was starting to heal. And sometimes the smallest gestures, the quietest confessions, and the courage to say what's in your heart are what create the strongest bonds. The house no longer felt cold. It felt like home.